It's Friday, everybody! And it's my last read aloud today. But first, let's do the pledge. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, one of my top 3 favorite books of all time. Library Lion by Michelle Knudsen, and it's a pretty easy 2.8. One day, a lion came to the library. He walked right past the circulation desk and up into the stacks. Mr. McBee ran down the hall to the head librarian's office. Miss Merriweather, he called. No running, said Miss Merriweather, without looking up. But there's a lion, said Mr. McBee, in the library. Is he breaking any rules? Asked Miss Merriweather. She was very particular about rule breaking. Well, no, said Mr. McBee. Not really. Then leave him be. The lion wandered all around the library. He sniffed the card catalog. He rubbed his head against the new book collection. Then he padded over to the story corner and went to sleep. No one was sure what to do. There weren't any rules about lions in the library. Soon it was time for story hour. There weren't any rules about lions at story hour either. The story lady seemed a little nervous, but she read out the first book's title in a good, clear voice, and the lion looked up, and the story lady kept reading. The lion stayed for the next story, and the story after that. He waited for another story, but the children began to walk away. Story hour is over, said a little girl to him. It's time to go. The lion looked at the children. He looked at the story lady. He looked at the closed books. And then he roared very loud. Rah! Miss Merriweather came striding out of her office. Who is making that noise? She demanded. It's the lion, said Mr. McBee. Miss Merriweather marched over to the lion. If you cannot be quiet, you will have to leave, she said in her stern voice. Those are the rules. And the lion kept roaring. He sounded sad. The little girl tugged on Miss Merriweather's dress. If he promises to be quiet, can he come back for story hour tomorrow? She asked. The lion stopped roaring, and he looked at Miss Merriweather. And Miss Merriweather looked back. Then she said, Yes, a nice quiet lion would certainly be allowed to come back for story hour tomorrow. Hooray, said the children. The next day the lion came back. You are early, said Miss Merriweather. Story hour is not until 3 o'clock. The lion did not budge. Oh, very well. You might as well make yourself useful. She sent him off to dust the encyclopedias until it was time for story hour. The next day, the lion came back early again, and this time Miss Merriweather asked him to lick all the envelopes for the overdue notices. Soon the lion began doing things without being asked. He dusted the encyclopedias. He licked the envelopes. He let small children stand on his back to reach the books on the highest shelves, and then he curled up in the story corner to wait for story hour to begin. At first, the people in the library were very nervous about that lion, but soon they got used to having him around. In fact, he seemed very well suited for the library. His big feet were very quiet on the carpeted floor. He made a comfy backrest for the children at story hour, and he never roared in the library anymore. What a helpful lion, the people would say. They patted his soft head as he walked by. How did we ever get along without him? Mr. McBee scowled when he heard that. They had always gotten along just fine before. No lions were needed. Lions, he thought, could not understand rules. They did not belong in the library. One day, after he had dusted all the encyclopedias and licked all the envelopes and helped all the small children, the lion padded down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office to see what else there was to do. There was still some time left before story hour. "Hello, Lion. I know something you can do. You can bring a book back into the stacks for me. Let me just get it down from the shelf." Miss Merriweather stepped up onto the step stool, and the book was just out of reach. She stood on her toes and stretched out her fingers. "Almost there." And Miss Merriweather stretched a little too far. "Oh, ouch," said Miss Merriweather softly, and she did not get up. "Mr. McBee," she called after a minute. But Mr. McBee was at the circulation desk, and he could not hear her calling. "Lion, please go and get Mr. McBee." The lion ran down the hall. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. The lion put his big front paws up on the circulation desk and looked at Mr. McBee. "Go away, Lion, I'm busy." The lion whined. He pointed his nose down the hall towards Miss Merriweather's office, and Mr. McBee ignored him. Finally, the lion did the only thing he could think to do. He looked Mr. McBee right in the eye, opened his mouth very wide, and roared the loudest roar he had ever roared in his life. "Oh, you're not being quiet," Mr. McBee gasped. "You're breaking the rules." Mr. McBee walked down the hall as fast as he could. The lion did not follow him. He had broken the rules, and he knew what that meant. He hung his head and walked toward the doors. Mr. McBee did not notice. "Miss Merriweather," he called as he walked. "Miss Merriweather, the lion broke the rules." He burst into Miss Merriweather's office. She was not in her chair. "Miss Merriweather? Sometimes there is a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. Now please go call a doctor. I think I've broken my arm." Mr. McBee ran to call the doctor. "No running," Miss Merriweather called after him. The next day, things were back to normal. Almost. Miss Merriweather's left arm was in a cast, and the doctor had told her not to work too hard. "I will have my lion to help me," she thought. But the lion did not come to the library that morning. At 3 o'clock, Miss Merriweather walked over to the story corner, and the story lady was just beginning, and the lion was not there. People in the library kept looking up from their books and screens, hoping they would see a familiar furry face. But the lion did not come that day, or the next day, or the next day either. One evening, Mr. McBee stopped by Miss Merriweather's office on his way home. "Can I do anything for you before I go, Miss Merriweather?" "Oh, no, thank you," she said, looking out the window. Her voice was very quiet, even for the library. Mr. McBee frowned as he walked away, and he thought there probably was something he could do for her, after all. He left the library, but he did not go home. He walked around the neighborhood, looked under the cars, behind bushes. He looked in backyards, trash cans, tree houses. Finally, he circled back to the library. The lion was sitting outside, looking in through the glass doors. "Hello, Lion," he said. And the lion did not turn around. "I thought you might like to know that there's a new rule at the library. No roaring allowed unless you have a very good reason. Say, if you're trying to help a friend who's been hurt, for example." And the lion's ears twitched, and he turned around. But Mr. McBee was already walking away. The next day, Mr. McBee walked down the hall to Miss Merriweather's office. "What is it, Mr. McBee?" she said in her new, sad, quiet voice. "I thought you might like to know that there's a lion in the library." Miss Merriweather jumped up from her chair and ran down the hall. No running, he smiled after her, and Miss Merriweather did not listen. Sometimes there was a good reason to break the rules, even in the library. And that, my friends, is my last story for this school year. I hope you've enjoyed them. I've certainly enjoyed reading them. And my last story is called Library Lion by Michelle Knudsen, and it's a 2.8. Go take an AR. I'll bet it's your last chance to go take one for the year. And have a wonderful holiday weekend and a great summer. And we will see you, fingers crossed, in August. Bye.